Well, welcome to today's rant. Hope you're up as early as I am. I'm actually about ready to eat lunch. Been up so long. But anyway, I've got a full day. This is my anniversary. We're down at the beach. We're planning to do some things together. And so I just wanted to go ahead and do this rant. I know many are asking about Trump's Supreme Court pick, and is this the right guy? You know, it seems like all the conservatives and conservative leaders that I know were really pulling for Amy Barrett, and Trump has kind of indicated she would be his next one, but he felt to go with Kavanaugh on this one. Was that the right thing? Could have been. He could be the best pick of all. First blush, I think this was a big disappointment for conservatives. But, you know, I think we need a wait-and-see attitude. There were some potential negatives, but I don't think they should be hung around the man's neck. He should be given a chance to explain and to prove himself. But he really could be Trump's the very best pick. I think the man does have the potential to be another Scalia. Whether he is or not, that will be proven over many years. But I think the potential is there for a great Supreme Court justice. And now that he is the pick, he's going to be examined. He has over 300 written decisions and positions. He's got a lot of stuff to go through so people can really see where he stands. But the one thing that stuck out, I think, gave many conservatives hope, was that he said he revered the Constitution. And I believe that was sincere. I believe he is sincere that he reveres the Constitution. But that does not even mean he understands it. Now, if you're a student of the Bible, you can revere it, love it more than anything else in the world, but still read it and not get some of the main points of it. I know a lot of people that read the New Covenant with an Old Covenant heart, and they just turn the New Covenant into another law. And so there are issues, there are nuances there. You know, revering the Constitution does not even mean that you will uphold it, because you may not understand it. As simple as it is, it's a simple document you can read in one sitting. The most powerful governmental document ever written. I think the most brilliant. But I tell you, I've read it I don't know how many times, and there were major points that I did not see until a friend pointed them out to me. It's like you have to have your eyes open. You have to have revelation or something. And I think if you're raised in today's legal environment, today's law schools, I think there are many ways that they teach the Constitution, and I think misrepresent it, that can get in people's minds. And when they read the Constitution, they don't see that it's in conflict with the Constitution. These are spiritually called strongholds that we have, that are ways of thinking that are wrong. And I think most of the legal system that has evolved in America has got some real serious problems that is in conflict with the Constitution and the founders' intent with the Constitution, which anybody can find out what their intent was with just about anything in the Constitution by going to the Federalist Papers, which are the papers they wrote to the states when they were seeking ratification of the Constitution they wrote the Federalist Papers to explain every detail of the Constitution to the states. This is what we meant by that. This is what we meant by this issue. So it was intended to give them understanding of what they meant, so it would not be misrepresented, it would not be misunderstood. But I've read the Federalist Papers. They're long, they're tedious, it's hard reading in some places, and I think very few, even of our top jurists, have probably ever even attempted to read them. But you can. That's where you can find out what they really meant, and what, some things that are used today to, I think, really twist what the Constitution meant were things like the welfare clause, the general welfare clause. That is now being interpreted as the foundation of the welfare state. Well, guess what? When that word was written in the Constitution, our whole concept of the welfare state did not exist. Nowhere in the world did it exist. They weren't talking about what we think of today as the welfare state. They were thinking about things that we do for the general good of the people. Not giving them benefits, not giving them the resources of the Treasury. For example, the founders wrote that this republic will not last if the people learn that they can vote for themselves those who will give them the resources of the Treasury. They warned against the welfare state, or even the concept, even long before it was ever even in any government's mind anywhere in the world. That's where a welfare state came from. No, they just wanted to provide everybody with a level playing field, fair, justice under the law, and but you had to make it for yourself. The government wasn't going to make your living for you. You had to go out and do it. You had to be resourceful. You had to be hardworking if you wanted to succeed. There were things like that. Of course, everything's changed now. But so if he really reveres the Constitution, Kavanaugh, this new pick, to me, he's going to search out things like that. And I think the greatest divisions in our country today are rooted in our departure from the Constitution in some basic ways. One has been the Supreme Court starting to think of itself as the supreme law of the land instead of the Constitution being the supreme law of the land. They think their word can trump the Constitution. They don't even refer to it many times and do many things in conflict with it. And the things that they've done in conflict have brought great division in our country. For example, as I shared yesterday, in the very basic statement in the Constitution that whatever authority is not specifically given to the federal government in this Constitution remains to the states and to the people. And nowhere in the Constitution does it give the Supreme Court or the federal government any authority over social issues, such as abortion, such as gay rights, or the denial of gay rights, or the denial of abortion rights. Those were not to be touched by the federal government. They were to be worked out in the states. When the Supreme Court usurped the authority of the states and of the people by them determining that they were going to make the law of the land by Roe v. Wade and other decisions, they set about a division in our country that is either going to be resolved by returning to the Constitution and returning these rights and this authority to the states and to the people, or it's going to get worse and worse until I have no doubt we will have civil war again. It will work out that way. And I think our Constitution was the most brilliant foundation for a form of government ever given, and it was meant that, if there are issues, if you believe there should be abortion rights, And you should pass this through laws in your state, not over the federal government, not over the whole country. Let each state decide what they want here. And then you have something to look at for every state to look at. Does it work or not? Was this the right thing to do? And then other states can decide. So, the overturning of Roe v. Wade and other such social issues of legislation where immorality, if you want, where the federal government sought to be the moral standard of the country or the immoral standard, whichever way you look at it, has got to be returned to the states and to the people. We will have civil war, no doubt about it. We are headed that way. But you take it back, you take the pressure off of the whole country. And the states that want it, they can have it. States that don't want it, they can have it. They don't have to take these things. And again, it's a process, and you can decide, and these things are worked out in the way they were intended through legislation, through votes, through the will of the people, not imposed on them by the Supreme Court of the United States, which actually does not have the constitutional authority to even determine what is constitutional or not. Check it out. Read it yourself. This is a usurped authority. And you hear last night that Kavanaugh believes that the Supreme Court or an independent judicial is the crown jewel of the republic. Now, to me, that's a little alarming. An independent judicial is essential for a republic, no doubt about that. But this concept that it is the supreme, that it is the crown jewel, that it is the most important, that the judicial is the most important, is wrong. It's a very wrong concept that there were three co-equal branches of government. Never, ever intended. Matter of fact, they argued against it. The founders believed and wrote extensively how the Congress is supposed to be the most powerful. That's why they gave the Congress the power of the purse and the power of impeachment, which was not given to any other branch of government. So that the Congress, which they thought would be the most responsive to the will of the people, would have the most authority over the other two branches. The president could say, I want this or that, and the Congress could say to the president, you can want it all you want, but we're not giving it to you because we're not going to pay for it. So, and they could do the same. Congress actually authorizes every court except the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the only court authorized by the Constitution, but it gives authority to the Congress to institute other courts as it sees necessary, and to fund them. The Congress puts in its budget every year the funding of every court. If we'd had any kind of competent leadership in the Congress, they would have defunded courts like the Ninth Circuit Court, that 80% of its decisions are overturned. It is just a left-wing, radical left-wing activist court that has caused much, much trouble in the country. So the Congress has the authority to do it, but you've got to have leadership to use the authority right. And we haven't had leadership in the Congress for a long time that would take the authority given to it. So, but the founders could believe that the Congress was supposed to be the most powerful, the executive next, then the courts last. Because they were really, really concerned that besides the people learning that they could vote for themselves, the resource of the Treasury, the greatest danger they saw of causing the failure of our republic and tyranny come into our country was what they called judicial tyranny, written extensively about by Thomas Jefferson, was what has happened in our country where the courts would start to legislate from the bench, start to make laws from the bench, which is the only authority to make law was given to our Congress, not to the executive, not to the judicial. When the judicial start using the bench, and this has been the left-wing tactic in America to impose its will on the whole country, was to use the courts to start legislating. This is why they're in such a tizzy over possibly losing control of the Supreme Court, where they have done so much damage to our country, imposing things on the country that was not the will of the people. Remember Proposition 8 in California, where California voted against same-sex marriage. Remember, that authority was given to the states and to the people, and they voted and said, we don't want that here. One activist judge who turned out to be homosexual, who turned out to be in a relationship with another man, obviously who he wanted to marry, overturned the will of millions of people unconstitutionally. That's judicial activism. It's one of the greatest threats to our liberty and to our republic. And I do believe Kavanaugh understands that. He spoke extensively against judicial activism, legislating from the bench, making laws from the bench, and the desperate need that judges had to only interpret the law and its application. Now that gives me hope. So he could turn out to be one of the best picks ever. That's my prayer, that he is. He is a pick now. I'm going to pray for him. I'm going to pray that things he may have misunderstanding on, that he would get revelation on, and that he would have the kind of courage and boldness that Scalia did, maybe even greater, and start to turn this thing back, because we will not get our government and our country back on track until we're moored again to the Constitution. I think it was divinely inspired, not scripture, but divinely inspired, gave us the most powerful, incredibly effective government in history. Had a lot of flaws, we made a lot of mistakes, almost all of which came from disregarding the Constitution, people disregarding it, leaders disregarding it. If you get back to what was written in the Constitution and following it and being moored to it, I think almost all of our most tragic mistakes could have been avoided. And in government, so anyway, that's kind of my story. I do have hope. Now, the liberals are going to go crazy over any pick Trump makes, over anything Trump does. It's all right, they've cried wolf so long, they've lied to us so much, and everybody sees it. Liberals see it now. Liberals are getting embarrassed by their own leadership, that they're hurting themselves, they're exposing their true roots, and I expect them to go hyperventilate over any little thing done and over this Supreme Court nominee and everything else. That's just what we can expect now. But I tell you, all it's doing is causing more and more people to wake up to the insanity that has taken over the left. Now, I'm not saying there's not some insanity on the right too, but nothing like it is that is being manifested on the left right now, not even close. They're not even making sense. And almost anybody that can think straight, which there are not many people that can do that can really think for themselves anymore, but any who can see through the mess. And regardless of how loud they scream, and they have a tendency, and people have a tendency to think because of a few people who scream really loud, who are really obnoxious, that it represents multitudes to a lot of people. It doesn't. It's representing fewer and fewer people. So they're having to scream louder and become more extreme and more, I think, insane. Absolutely insane. Some of the stuff being said on the left right now is absolutely insane. There's no way a sane person could embrace that kind of stuff. But that's where we are. We have to plod on and seek the return of our Republican form of government that is moored to the Constitution, that is the basis of all authority and is the supreme law of the land. So bottom line, I have real concerns about Kavanaugh and real hopes. And really, listening to the man last night, my hopes began to rise above my concerns. I think this really could be a great one. That's my prayer and my hope. But also, I think we've got to call everybody's hand, whether they're from the right or from the left, whoever they are, when they get out of bounds anymore, and if they do not work resolutely to return our government to the foundation of the authority of our government, to the Constitution, as it is written. So that's my story today, and I'm sticking to it. I hope this was helpful for you.